Salutations and welcome, horse racing fans. I'm Matthew DeSantis, and this is the Win Place Show, a podcast devoted to all aspects of horse racing and handicapping that is proudly part of the Amalfi Media Network. Before we get into the show today, I wanted to take a quick moment to recognize the passing of Medina Spirit from sudden death on Monday after his 5-furlong workout at Santa Anita. Sadly, horse deaths are not an uncommon element in this sport, and I understand why so many have trouble tolerating the sport because of that. I truly do understand where they're coming from. Now, it will be at least 1 to 2 months before we find out the reasons, then the causes, and the full results of the death of Medina Spirit, but in the meantime, there are louder and louder calls for reform from within and outside of the horse racing industry. I have many thoughts on this matter, and I wrote an article that was published on Thursday at amalfimedia.com that you can find and linked in the episode notes if you're listening to the podcast or beneath the video if you're watching on YouTube. The most important thing is the health and safety of horses, and if we keep that as our North Star, then we're off to a good start. We certainly grieve for the passing of Medina Spirit and send our condolences to those who loved him so much. Now, there's no good transition to talking about horse racing and handicapping, but that is what we're going to do today. So with that being said, we are going to preview 2 stakes races, the Grade 3 Mr. Prospector Stakes taking place at Gulfstream Park, as well as the Poinsettia Stakes at Oaklawn, which is a new track that I've not previewed before on this particular show. So that's a lot of fun. Both those races are taking place on Saturday. Now, just a quick reminder to follow, download, rate, review, and share the Win Place Show on the podcast platform of your choice, and subscribe to the Win Place Show on our YouTube channel. And I just have to say a big thank you to those who take a couple seconds and press that thumbs up button on YouTube. We really do appreciate it. Press that 5-star button on the podcast platform of your choice and give us a quick rating and a review, perhaps. It really does help a lot, means a lot to us, allows us to spread out the message, and allows for us to continue to reach more people with our horse racing content. So thank you so very much to all of those of you who've taken time to do that. Now, aside from today's preview, remember to go to amalfimedia.com to get my win, my plays, and my show picks for the entire Saturday card at Gulfstream Park. And you can use those picks for Stable Duel contest this weekend. That's right. They have a $1,000 contest that has a $10 buy-in and a $10,000 contest with a $150 buy-in that are both taking place on Saturday. And so my Win Place Show picks for all 11 races on Gulfstream's card are going to be very helpful as you build your stable and entry. It's a great way to get started. And listen, if you just want to play free contests, that's okay. Stable Duel's got you covered there, as they have a free contest at Tampa Downs on Saturday as well. So even if you don't want to spend money, there's still a way to get in the game. Finally, make sure to interact with us on Twitter and on YouTube to let me know how you think the races are going to break down this weekend, and share with your fellow horse racing fanatics on social media. Okay, well, let's dive into the races at Gulfstream Park and Oaklawn this weekend. And let's start with Gulfstream Park, and that is the Grade 3 Mr. Prospector Stakes. So let's take a look at that field for this particular race. So this is a 7-furlong race on dirt for 3-year-olds and up. As I mentioned, this is the one at Gulfstream Park, and post time is 4:39 p.m. Eastern, and it is a 7-horse field, starting off in post position 1 with the horse Flapjack, trained by Jack Sisterton and jockeyed by Julian Leparoux. Then Wind of Change, trained by Safi Joseph Jr. and jockeyed by Edgar Zayas. Poppy's Pride, trained by Michael Yates, and jockeyed by Miguel Angel Vasquez. In the number 4 slot is Endorsed. This one is trained by Mike Maker and jockeyed by Tyler Gaffalione. Then Dennis's Moment, the Morning Line favorite, trained by Dale Romans and jockeyed by Corey Lannery. Doc Amster, trained by Jorge Delgado and jockeyed by Chantel Sutherland. And then finally in the 7-hole, you have Officiating, also trained by Safi Joseph Jr. and jockeyed by Louis Saez. Okay, so this is an interesting field. And what I would say is this is not an overwhelming field. I have seen far better Grade 3 fields in my time here, but sometimes it's not really about the quality of the field. It's about how they match up to each other. And this is a very competitive field. And so I like this field quite a bit because there's a lot of horses that you could make an argument have a real chance to win this race. And so I think that's going to make for a very exciting race, even if I don't think this is maybe as an elite of field as we've seen in other grade three races throughout the year this year. And there's maybe an argument to be made that the Poinsettia Stakes that we're going to talk about next might even have a slightly stronger field. But like I said, that's a debate for another day, perhaps. But what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about each horse, just to give you a little rundown, and then I'll give you obviously my win, my place, and my show. But I think one of the things that is going to play out here is you're going to see, I think, a real discrepancy in speed in terms of early speed. There's some horses that are a little bit longer odds that traditionally like to get to the lead, and you might think, well, they're going to serve as a rabbit. But there's one horse in particular in this field, Wind of Change, who we're going to talk about for a second, who likes to get to the lead and quite frankly just has more speed than some of these long shots who might otherwise serve as rabbits. So it's really going to be interesting to see some of the strategy maybe that's being used by the different jockeys there. But let's start with the inside rail and the horse Flapjack at 6-1. It's important. Let's keep an eye on Flapjack. And I say that because this is a horse that's actually entered in a race the previous day at Gulfstream Park. So this is a horse that is entered in the 7th race at Gulfstream on Friday. So obviously, if Flapjack runs in that spot on Friday, he will not be running in this particular race on Saturday. So that's something just to keep an eye out if you're watching this early Friday morning or even early afternoon on Friday. Keep an eye out for that to see whether or not Flapjack will actually be entered in this particular race. He's an interesting horse. This is a horse that had been running a lot on turf over the last year or so and just recently switched back to dirt, has had 2 consecutive third place finishes on dirt. There's been a little bit of rejuvenation. Some of those speed figures have looked a little bit better since switching back from turf to dirt. So that's been promising. Finished third to Dennis's Moment, who's the morning line favorite in this race 2 races ago. Pretty close, about 2.5 lengths. So certainly was competitive in that spot. That said, you saw kind of a decline the next time out in terms of speed figures. And I wonder if the newness of the dirt is already starting to wear off. That said, those races that I just mentioned were optional claiming races at Keeneland and Churchill. So this is a step up in competition. And when you go back and look at what Flapjack did back in 2020 and kind of starting out in his career on dirt, he really didn't show up in some of those grade, even non-graded stakes, let alone a grade 3 race. So I'm hesitant there, and also I just don't love the odds. At 6-1, I would like Flapjack a lot more. At 10-1, maybe 12-1, but at 6-1, those just seem like really short odds for a horse that I think has a lot of question marks. So let's go to a horse that I don't see a lot of question marks with, and that is Wind of Change, who's going off at 3-1. This is the horse that, as I mentioned, has the absolute best speed in this field. Likes a wet surface, but can win on a dry surface. Has run really big for Saffie Joseph Jr. since being, switching over to his barn a few races back. And interestingly enough, this horse, Wind of Change, why do I like him to win the Mr. Prospector? Because he's already won the Mr. Prospector. That's right. And not even like last year or something like that. He won the Mr. Prospector back in May. How did he win this race in May? Well, there's a race in Monmouth called the Mr. Prospector Stakes as well. He actually won that race at Monmouth. So, hey, that's pretty good luck. If you've already won the Mr. Prospector once, you might as well try to win it again. So just a kind of a neat little thing. Now, that said, it took about a 3-month layoff coming out of that and came back on some improving speed numbers each time out. So it's kind of gotten back into shape, has rounded back into shape. I have to say, I was at Charlestown Downs or Charlestown racetrack when he ran in the Russell Road against Vertical Threat. That race really showed Wind of Change just has much more elite tactical speed than anybody else in this field. He really has run a hot pace and a fast pace. He can run kind of an aggressive or even just an assertive pace in this race and put some of the other horses to shame. That's something to point out. All of the other horses in this race really have run behind very slow and pedestrian paces. So that's something to keep in mind because Wind of Change is going to be able to go out, set an aggressive pace, and there's really nobody who's ever run behind that type of pace before. So it's going to be interesting to see how they adjust. One of those horses that may serve as a rabbit or may try to challenge Wind of Change a little bit is Poppy's Pride. This is a horse going off at 20-1. This is a horse that's really maxing out at 7 furlongs. tends not to do quite as well at that distance, and also tends to really fade down the stretch. So this is a horse that is your classic rabbit, goes to the lead, sets the lead for the first half of the race, and then really fades down the stretch. And so maxing out at 7 furlongs, this level of competition, it's just hard for me to see Poppy's Pride playing a significant role. Interestingly enough, last time out, this horse broke a little slow and was shuffled back. And you thought, well, maybe that would be a good thing. Maybe the horse, could reserve some energy and make a little bit of a run. Nope. The exact same thing happened. The horse really faded down the stretch. So just don't see this as a particularly live long shot. Now, a horse that I do like is Endorsed. And leave it up to me to like a horse that has not won in over a year and a half. And Endorsed has not won since May of 2020 when he ran and won an allowance race at Oaklawn. But this is a horse that runs just really well, just runs kind of consistent Beyer speed figures. Some of his numbers don't look as impressive if you're looking at him on Timeform US because he's run behind some slower paces, but he's really consistent and has gone up against really good competition. I mean, 2 races back, he went up against Special Reserve and Breeders' Cup champion Aloha West. So it's a horse that's run up against some really nice, run up against, Jalen Journey and some other just really nice horses the last few races. So he's been running at a really high level. And honestly, this is almost a step down in class in some ways. Even though he's not been necessarily running a lot of grade 3s, he's run some grade 2s. He's run some really, really strong non-graded stakes races. So I just really like this. The workouts have been great. He should sit right off a pace and make kind of a move at the end. So I really like Endorsed quite a bit at 5-2. You're not getting, phenomenal odds, but I kind of like those odds for a horse that, like I said, may not have won since last year, but really is always right there. And another thing to point out, he's run 9 races this year. He hasn't won any of them, but he's hit the board 6 and 9 times. So he's always right there at the end, even if he's not in the winner's circle. So I do like that about the horse, that he's very consistent, doesn't really turn in any clunkers, which is something you like to see, honestly. So let's then go to the morning line favorite, Dennis's Moment, who's going off a 2-1. This is a horse that won the last time out at a $62,000 optional claiming race with a huge big figure. But that said, I'm a little worried about Dennis's Moment because he has not run anywhere near that type of a speed figure since last year. Or since really 2 years ago, since 2019. This is a horse that has had multiple long layoffs, really did not run from November of 2020 until August of 2021, has come back and run well, but it should be pointed out, if you're looking inside the numbers, he ran well at a, pretty inexpensive optional claiming race at Ellis Park. Then he stepped up to a non-graded stakes race at Churchill and promptly finished 5th by 9 3/4 lengths. And oh, by the way, Endorsed was in that race, and Endorsed finished 2nd and beat him by 8.5 lengths, basically. And then the last time out at Keeneland, winning that $62,000 optional claiming. So, this is a horse that has run some big races in the past, ran the Fountain of Youth, ran the BC Juvenile, won the Iroquois back in 2019. So this is a horse that's run some big races and some big moments and has posted a really nice speed figure last time out. The workouts have looked good. It's just interesting to see how much has changed between September and now. Because in September, when he stepped up to that non-graded stakes level, it didn't work out particularly well. Now he's coming back a couple of months later with another performance under his belt at 7 furlongs. That was really strong. Now maybe we'll see a better performances out of Dennis's Moment. That said, I just don't love the 2-1 odds here. It's kind of the same thing as Flapjack. It's not that I dislike Dennis's Moment, but I just don't buy him necessarily as the morning line favorite here at 2-1. And I understand all 3 of them, Dennis's Moment, Endorsed, and Winds of Change, are all pretty closely bunched together there in terms of morning line odds, but I just a little concerned about Dennis's Moment. Also, should be said, has really run behind slow paces. So we'll see how that plays out on Saturday. But again, this is a horse, much like Endorsed, that should be relatively well positioned. Now, Doc Amster is one of the other horses in this race, and this is a horse that saw a massive speed jump last time out, was running from a buyer speed standpoint, was running kind of in the 60s, and then all of a sudden ran a 91 buyer speed figure last time out at Gulfstream at 6 furlongs. Should be pointed out this horse has never run 7 furlongs, which I think is a little bit of a red flag that you're going to this distance. This is a horse that does, if you get him on the lead, he's not bad. He doesn't like being back in the pack. That's pretty obvious. He doesn't like getting dirt kicked up in his face because whenever he's been further back, he's always finished very, very far off the pace. This is a horse that likes to be 1-2. I would say this is a horse that'll probably be right with Wind of Change. I'm just concerned about the distance there, never going 7 furlongs before, and then B, this is a step up in class. I mean, this is a horse that's run a lot of optional claiming races, a lot of allowance races, has never even run in a non-graded stakes race. Now we're going to a grade 3. So I think there's some questions there with class. And so I'm just a little concerned about that in terms of how he's going to end up performing. And I just don't think, again, he doesn't have the elite speed. And you would expect to see a regression. I don't know if the winning horse in this race is going to run a 91 buyer speed figure, which is what Doc Amster ran last time out. But here's what I do know is you're going to need to run at least a high 80s. And he hasn't even run a lot of those. Every time he runs a big race, he has a pretty significant regression afterwards. So again, coming off that fresh big run in the beginning of November at Gulfstream looks great, but traditionally you're going to see a regression. And if he regresses from that, he's really got no chance in this particular field. So then let's go to the horse on the far outside officiating. Going off at 12-1 is a horse that has the outside post position, which you typically like in a sprint, but this is more of a mid-pack horse. Interestingly, this is a horse that's very versatile. Has run on the synthetic down there at Gulfstream, which is Tapeta, has run on dirt in terms of turf race that was taken off the turf because of conditions and run on the dirt. He's also run on turf. So those are just the last 4 times out. He's really had the broad array of different surfaces. His last race out on the synthetic was awful, but we can, I think, chalk that up to A, kind of stretching out in distance, and B, the surface. Workouts look really good. He's had a 2-month layoff before this race, and maybe that was what he needed. Maybe it was that second race back. Maybe he just needed to run, and it didn't even matter kind of how poorly he did in that showing up stakes at Gulfstream Park. But that was still a pretty bad performance. And so we'll see. I mean, this is a horse that traditionally does seem to be kind of a cut below what is going to be needed from a speed standpoint to really contend in this particular race. That said, Luis Saez is a significant factor here, and you like the far outside post position. He'll be able to place the horse where is going to be best for him. So he's going to get probably the best ride possible. I'm just not 100% sure this is the best spot for officiating in terms of stepping up in class. I do think that the distance will actually help him. This is a horse that will have no problems with 7 furlongs, traditionally runs 7.5, sometimes a mile. So even if there's a little bit of a hot pace, I wouldn't expect officiating to wilt down the stretch. And so if you like, maybe this is a horse, maybe comes in, captures the bottom portion of a trifecta, picks up some pieces on the board if other horses starting to wilt, something to consider perhaps. So ultimately, how do I see the Mr. Prospector Stakes playing out? Well, listen, I think this is going to be over by the quarter pole. I think Wind of Change is going to break well. I think he's going to use that early tactical speed that he has and get to the front. And so I like Wind of Change at 3-1 to win. I like Endorsed, who doesn't win, but always runs well, to come in second and to place. And I like the morning line favorite, Dennis's Moment, to show. Now, it's pretty chalky, although I have it reversed in terms of I have the one who's the longest shot out of the favorites to win. But if you want to play a horse like Flapjack, if you want to play even a horse like Officiating, I think underneath, instead of Dennis's Moment, maybe to enrich things a little bit, I could see that. I'm a little hesitant about Dennis's Moment. I'm not 100% sold on that horse, so I'm kind of fading the favorite here. I do really like Wind of Change and Endorse, though. Okay, so that said, let's head over to the Poinsettia Stakes at Oaklawn. And this is another really, I think, an exciting race. Really excited for this one. And so this is taking place just a few minutes later, actually, at 5:13 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. And so let's take a look at that Poinsettia Stakes field. And this is a 1.16 miles on dirt for 3-year-old horses. And so this is another 7-horse field. And so starting in post position 1 is Last Samurai, trained by Dallas Stewart and jockeyed by John Kenton Court. Then Defeater, trained by Tom Amos and jockeyed by Ricardo Santana Jr. Flash of Mischief, trained by Carl Broberg and jockeyed by Ramon Vasquez. Superstock, the Steve Asmussen horse, jockeyed by Luis Contreras, going off at 9-5. The Myopic in 5th, trained by Robertino Diodoro and jockeyed by David Cohen. And then Simovich, trained by Mike Maker and jockeyed by Florent Giroux. And then finally, coming in the 7th hole is Ram, trained by the Hall of Famer D. Wayne Lucas and jockeyed by Francisco Arrieta. So let's talk a little bit about this race. 1.16 miles on the dirt. This is another interesting field. Let's start with the inside. Last Samurai, interesting. Going off at 5-1. The only recent win Last Samurai has been on turf, and distance might be a little bit of an issue. And when I say that, it's kind of might be interesting because running a long distance is not the issue for Last Samurai. Last Samurai runs 1.25 miles, 1.5 miles regularly. In fact, I saw him run 1.5 miles at the Greenwood Cup at Parks on Pennsylvania Derby Day. Finished 3rd in that race. What the problem with Last Samurai is 1.16 miles, that's actually maybe too short. Interestingly enough, this is a horse that has never hit the board when running 1.16 miles. Has run this distance 3 times, never hit the board once. Seems to actually like a lot more distance. And I think part of this could just be the fact that, the horse takes a little while to get going and doesn't maybe have the sort of, people aren't fading as much at 1.16 miles as they might at 1.125 miles, 1.25 miles, 1.5 miles. You don't have something to run into quite as much at that point. So, there's some question marks there, I think, with Last Samurai as it relates to distance. He's not going to have a particularly hot pace in this field. The other horses are not going to be taxed. So at 5-1, I just don't necessarily love those odds for Last Samurai. Although I think he's a good horse, I just think he actually needs more distance. He's running up with some nice competition. He lost the Greenwood Cup, as I mentioned, to Magic Michael. He lost to Huge Bigley 2 races ago. Of course, Huge Bigley came back and won the graded stakes race, the Chaluki, at Churchill not that long ago. So he's run up against some nice competition. He's prepped well. The workouts look good. It just feels like short odds at 5-1 for a horse that doesn't end up in the winner's circle all that often. I mean, that's the other thing to consider here. Is this the horse with 11 career races and only 2 career victories, finished in the money 6 out of 11 times, and has finished in the money 5 out of 8 times this year with only 1 win. So again, I'm just a little concerned about a horse that doesn't win very often going off at 5-1. That just don't love those odds. So let's move to a very lightly raced horse, and you already know I'm going to be interested in this horse. Defeater at 3-1. This is a horse that's lightly raced and has shown improvement. That's my cup of tea right there. Now, that said, this horse has already tried to step up in competition and didn't work out particularly well. He ran 2 races ago at the Grade 3 Oklahoma Derby at Remington Park, and he ran against Flash of Mischief and Superstock. And he promptly finished 6th and lost by 8.5 lengths. So that was, he was kind of trending the right direction. He was the typical horse I love in that he only had 3 races before that. The speed numbers kept getting better and better, but really laid an egg that day. And you could see that even the race before that was an allowance race. It was a $100,000 allowance race. Ran a really big speed figure, finished 2nd, but if you look inside the numbers, finished 2nd by 5.5 lengths. So really was a well-beaten 2nd, and that was at 7 furlongs. Then he stepped up to 1.8 miles at the Oklahoma Derby, really got beat badly, faded down the stretch, was never really a factor. Then comes back, runs in a really rich allowance rates at Churchill Downs, $123,000 allowance. At 1 mile, ends up winning by 7.5 lengths. So really bounced back beautifully from that race, ran really well. Workouts have looked good. Been working out at Fairgrounds, working out at Churchill. Looks great there. I will say Ricardo Santana Jr. is still on just an epic cold streak. I think he's now 4 for his last 134. Now, that said, he did win at Oaklawn last weekend, so he's at least got, one win under his belt here at Oaklawn this meet, and that's good for his psyche, good for the ego. Um, I just don't know. 3-1. I like Defeater. I don't necessarily love him at that price. And again, this is a mile and a 16th, stretching out in distance. Maybe a little bit of question marks there against this quality of field. So let's go to Flash Some Mischief. This is just a very consistent horse, going off at 5-2, beat Defeater by about 7 lengths, as I mentioned at the Oklahoma Derby. And that wasn't like a weird race. Like that wasn't like, well, maybe there was a really hot pace or a really slow race or pace. Or no, that was just a very normal race, and he easily dispensed of that horse. And so again, what's changed since September in terms of, has Defeater gotten that much better? Has Flash of Mischief regressed? Not really. Flash of Mischief followed that Oklahoma Derby second place victory, or second place finish, up with a victory at the Delta Mile Stakes. So at Delta Downs. So, I mean, this is a horse that, followed it up with another win in 2021, 11 races, 5 victories, 4 second places, has hit the board 9 out of 11 times. Just an incredibly, like I said, an incredibly consistent horse. And one that I just absolutely love. At 5-2, I actually think you're getting absolutely great values. I think a mile and a 16th is probably the maximum distance where he's effective. Flash of Mischief is a front runner. This is a horse that will go to the lead and typically will kind of hang on, sometimes fades just a very little bit. But against this class of horse, has shown the ability to really win, wire the field. So again, I really like this horse. This is not going to be a particularly hot pace. I don't think anybody's going to really challenge Flash of Mischief on the lead. And so this is a horse, again, I just really like a lot in this spot. So let's go to Superstock, who is the morning line favorite at 9-5. This was the Arkansas Derby winner earlier this year, and obviously a Kentucky Derby horse who had a very forgettable day in May, finished 16th in that race, quite a ways back. And took a little bit of time to rebound, but he has rebounded. He's won 2 of his last 3 trips out at Ellis Park and Zia Park. That said, that Zia Park victory last time out with Irad aboard, oh my God, was that a slow pace. I mean, that was just glacial in terms of how slow they moved around the track that day. So I'm a little worried about Superstock in that regard, of what's going to happen if he's got a little bit more speed he's got to contend with and deal with. At the Oklahoma Derby, he ran a little bit behind Flash of Mischief, about a length behind, and really didn't make up any ground necessarily on Flash of Mischief. It wasn't as if, Superstock was coming and as Flash of Mischief was regressing. Didn't really make up much ground there. So, I'm not sure that the mile and a 16th here is going to be a factor in terms of maybe he can catch Flash of Mischief. I'm just a little skeptical about Superstock. Again, that Oklahoma Derby finished 3rd. The Iowa Derby finished 4th. The Texas Derby finished 4th. So again, just consistent. He hasn't been bad, but again, has not always hit the board necessarily. Has won 3 out of 8 races this year. So again, a morning line favorite that I think is very susceptible. I would say very vulnerable. At 9-5, I just really don't love that price. So then let's talk about Myopic. This is a horse going off at 12-1. And this horse is a pretty clear cut below in terms of speed compared to the rest of the field. He did finish second at the Grade 3 Canadian Derby 2 races ago. That said, he only posted a 71 Beyer speed figure in that effort. And that was, like I said, a really slow pace. And that was a mile and a quarter, but it was still a really slow pace for a mile and a quarter. I think it was over 2 minutes and 4 seconds. Now, that said, his trainer, Robertino Diodoro, has had a lot of success at Oaklawn. And, the Diodoro and David Cohen connection is usually a pretty good one, his jockey. That said, in this particular field, I just don't know about this horse hitting the board. I mean, this horse has run kind of one race, that was 4 races ago at Indiana Grand, which was a maiden weight special that, he ran an 85 Beyer speed figure. He would need to run that to kind of hit the board, I think, in this particular race. And I just don't see it. I mean, this horse, since running that, has run a 74, 71, 69. So has kind of regressed since breaking his maiden. So I just don't have a lot of faith in this horse in this particular field. And there's another long shot that I like a lot more. So let's talk about one of the other long shots, Simovich, going off at 8-1. This is another horse, if you just look at the numbers, is clearly a cut below where everyone else is. Now, that said, there is something that you can like a little bit with Simovich, and that the last time out, he stepped up to a mile and a 16th. All of his previous races were at a mile or 7 furlongs, stepped up to a mile and a 16th and won, and really ran the best race of his career at that point. So maybe stretching out longer is a good thing. Mike Maker took over 2 races ago from Bill Mott. Seems like there's been some progression there. And that was, the last time out was a pretty expensive $122,000 allowance race at Churchill Downs. And like I said, that was an impressive victory, was really sitting in the 4th, 5th position most of the way around, made a move, ended up winning by a length, had Joel Rosario aboard that day. Obviously has Florent Giroux aboard on Saturday. But again, I think that's a lot of projection to go from a 77 in an allowance race to now thinking maybe he's going to run an 87 in a non-graded stakes race, and that might get him on the board. So just a little bit of questions there. 8-1, though, is not bad odds. If you want to take a shot, I don't blame you, and has had some nice workouts at Oaklawn Park just recently this past week. So definitely a horse trending in the right direction. I'll be interested to see how he does at this distance. And then the long shot. This is a horse I really love, and I got to give a little shout out to Sarah Albadwi, who joined me a couple weeks ago on the podcast to do some guest handicapping, because I know she loves this horse. And this is the horse Ram, going off at 12-1. This is a horse that finished very far back in the Preakness, ran at the Preakness, I think finished about 32 lengths off the pace. So that was a day that he would rather forget. But bounced back, and I think at 12-1, Ram offers just tremendous value in this particular race. If you've watched this horse comes flying from off the pace, and I don't know why they have not been running this horse at longer distances sooner, because I understand the Preakness was a little bit of a setback, but this horse seems to love distance. And so I just love Ram at 12-1 here. I'm just going to give you his last 4 races so to make a point. This is a horse that comes from way off the pace, makes a big run at the end. Last 4 races. Okay. 3rd place at a stakes race in which he made up 9 lengths. 2nd place at a stakes race in which he made up 10 lengths. 2nd at a $62,000 optional claimer in which he made up 8 lengths. And then last time out, 3rd at a $132,000 allowance race in which he made up 2 lengths. This is a horse that can make up distance on the field. I think this is a horse that's just going to gobble up ground late. And every time I've watched this horse run since the Preakness, I've thought to myself, man, if this was only another furlong, if this was only another 1/8 of a mile, if this was only another 1/16 of a mile, if this was only another 2 furlongs, man, this horse would be winning. So they're finally stretching him out, and I think that's fantastic. He's run against really comparable fields to this too. Even those allowance and optional claimer races were really strong at Churchill Downs. So at 12-1, I just don't see, like, Myopic's at 12-1 too. And to me, there's absolutely no comparison between Myopic and Ram. I would be throwing my money at Ram rather than Myopic if you're telling me which of those 2 horses has a better chance of hitting the board. So I just really like Ram. I don't necessarily like him to win, because the problem with Ram is kind of the problem with a lot of horses that we see, like a problem. I've talked about it before on the show, like Oviatt Class, who's a 2-year-old. They just go so far back. And Ram's the same way. He breaks so slow, and he just breaks so poorly at times, and it's just so far back early on in the race that he just digs himself this huge hole that he has to then run himself out of. And he does a pretty good job of it. Maybe in this race, he's not going up against sprint horses at 7 furlongs or a mile. And so maybe the break isn't quite as fast, and maybe he's placed a little bit more forwardly. We'll see. I wouldn't hold my breath. But this is a horse that, like I said, will make a big run down the stretch. I like him. I like him in this spot a lot. So, like I said, I just think he presents tremendous value underneath. And Like I said, we'll see how forwardly placed he is. So, how do I see the Poinsettia Stakes playing out? Well, again, I'm going to fade the favorite here. I just am not really sold on super stock, and so I'm going to go to win. Flash of Mischief. I think this is another kind of front running winning effort. I just really like this horse a lot. Very consistent, and I just think nobody's going to be able to catch up to him in this particular field. I do have Ram coming in second. I love the value you're going to get there. And then I like Defeater to show. I think that's a young horse that's going to have a little bit of a bounce back and I think will improve based upon what he did at the Oklahoma Derby. Okay. Well, listen, folks, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this preview of the stakes races at Gulfstream Park and Oaklawn Park. Now, remember, we have lots of content for you this weekend since we have the Win Place show picks for the entire Saturday card at Gulfstream. But coming on Saturday morning, I'll also be posting my Win Place show picks for the entire card at Oaklawn Park, so you can get those as well. And remember to check out the Stable Duel games this weekend with the $1,000 and $10,000 contests at Gulfstream Park, and even those free contests at Tampa Downs and all the other tracks that they cover. The best place to get those picks is to head over to amalfimedia.com, which is linked in the episode notes and underneath the video on YouTube. Finally, just a reminder to follow, download, rate, and review the Win Place Show on the podcast platform of your choice, and subscribe to the Win Place Show on YouTube, in addition to following me on Twitter at the handle @FailedToMenace to get all the great horse racing content you need to get you ready for the 2022 season. Until next time, friends, I'm Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races, and reminding you that it's now post time.